conflict could lead US and China to World War III. An arms race for North Korea's nuclear weapons could lead superpowers China and the United States into a devastating war, a Harvard academic has claimed. The US and China have clashed over how to deal with Kim Jong-un's reign of terror. President Donald Trump has pushed for China to rein in their ally and impose more sanctions, but China has opted for a softer approach. One of the many options on the table for Trump is to wipe out Kim Jong-un, but this could lead to many more problems. Conflict expert Graham Allison believes there are many scenarios that could lead to a world war, sparked by the US and China. He believes that the death or removal of the tubby tyrant could cause an arms race between the two superpowers for his nuclear arsenal, sparking a global conflict. He wrote, China and the United States are currently on a collision course for war. North Korea's dictator, Kim Jong-un, might die without an obvious heir, sparking chaos. American and Chinese special forces might rush into North Korea to secure the regime's nuclear weapons. The North Korea issue has escalated in the last few days after the launch of their deadly ICBM missile, which could hit the US mainland if fully operational. But the US has vowed to deal with the Hermit Kingdom on its own.
Erdogan says Turkey will not sign Paris Junk Science Accord now that US won't pay them off. The Paris Climate Accord was a massive redistribution of wealth plan that would punish the United States and US workers. The Paris climate deal would result in no significant reduction in global temperatures, but the US would get poorer, and bureaucrats in poor countries would get free money. It's really no surprise that Barack Obama and Democrats would support such an anti-American deal. On Saturday, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey would likely not ratify the agreement now that the United States would not be funneling free money to the regime. The far-left website Think Progress reported President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on Saturday that Turkey will not be ratifying the Paris Climate Accord, citing President Donald Trump's decision to abandon the deal. After that step taken by America, the position that we adopt is in the direction of not passing it in Parliament, he told the press Saturday at the end of the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany. Despite the fact that every other leader but Trump signed on the summit's final statement asserting the Paris Agreement is irreversible, Erdogan said some of those countries had a problem with the accord and are not renewing their support. Get news like this in your Facebook news feed. Gateway Pundit commenting policy as a privately owned website. We reserve the right to edit or remove comments that contain spam, advertising, vulgarity, threats of violence, racism, anti-Semitism, or personal abusive attacks on other users. The same applies to trolling, the use of multiple aliases, or just generally being a jerk. Enforcement of this policy is at the sole discretion of the site administrators, and repeat offenders may be blocked or permanently banned without warning. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
Adhering to the agreements reached by Presidents Putin and Trump during the G20 summit last week in Hamburg, the US is apparently losing enthusiasm over them. The most recent example relates to the process of monitoring the ceasefire agreed in Syria, which has been discussed, certainly was discussed in Hamburg by both leaders.
The US and Russia have committed to monitoring the ceasefire and ensuring humanitarian access to the areas. Initially, security in these areas will be ensured by Russian military police in close cooperation with the US and Jordan.
Who those monitors will be, I don't know at this point. I know we have folks in the region. I know that our special envoy to Syria is actively engaged in these conversations, so I anticipate we'll get that information in the near future.
The details of the agreed ceasefire in Syria, which came into force last Sunday, are just one of the things the US government appears to be playing down. Jacqueline Vugo filed this report from Washington.
The highly anticipated bilateral meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit ended with high hopes that the two countries could finally leave all the bad blood behind and see a new stage in relations. After the two presidents met in Hamburg, Tillerson came out saying that they had great chemistry. They discussed cybersecurity and a ceasefire in Syria and were really ready to move forward. Putin and Trump did discuss that joint cybersecurity unit, but Trump has since backtracked on that with a post on Twitter after the idea was widely attacked here in Washington. And about that ceasefire in Syria, the most important achievement reached by the US and Russia in conjunction with Jordan, Moscow has already outlined what role in the suspension of hostilities they will play, but America's has yet to be clarified. And recent reports show that the Pentagon was left completely out of the process. We reached out to the Pentagon to see if they could shed some light on the plan, and they in turn said that the State Department was the head agency and referred us to them. But they also have yet to come up with a solid strategy.
In terms of who is doing what, when, where, how, some of those details are still being worked out.
So no real answer there either. And the spokeswoman also had a rather strange reaction to Russia's foreign minister having made comments about working on a ceasefire monitoring station in Jordan.
Is there any clarity so far on the monitoring of the Syrian ceasefire? Obviously, Lavrov said yesterday that it was going to be done with the United States and Jordan from a center in Amman. Do you have any more details on that?
Mr. Lavrov likes to talk a lot and get out ahead, I think, of some of the negotiations that are underway. That is all still being worked out.
So we're seeing again, one step forward, two steps back. What's becoming the usual U.S. approach to working with Russia.
Some of America's partners in Europe have also pointed out the inconsistency of America's Russia policy. German government official Gernot Oehler has lashed out at the US, saying its policy is an indecisive back and forth with no clear direction. A former US diplomat, Jim Jatras, told us what's behind the mixed signals coming from Washington.
If the Russians believe the Americans are talking with two voices, that's because we are. Clearly, I think President Trump is very sincere in trying to work out some kind of a broader arrangement with Moscow, and that he faces tremendous opposition here in Washington from people who didn't want this meeting to take place at all, or wanted to be at best a pro forma handshake and pleasantries kind of thing, not to affect any substance. We have a lot of people here, if you will, in the deep state who don't want any cooperation with Russia at all on anything, particularly on Syria, and there's a huge potential that somebody may try to sabotage it, but I'm still rather optimistic.